What you're about to experience are my opinions and truths. I'm suggesting they're possibilities for you to consider, in which you can then come up with your own logical conclusions.
You're giving me the fever tonight. I don't wanna give in. I've been playing with fire. You forget I've seen you work before. Take them straight to the top. Leave them crying for more. I've seen you burn them before. Fire and ice. You come on like a flame, then you turn a cold shoulder. Fire and ice. I wanna give you my love, but you just take a little piece of my heart. You just tear it apart.
Welcome out, everyone. All of you great decoders around the world, wherever you may be, both male and female. My name is Logan, and this, of course, is Decode Your Reality. And today we're going to be breaking down and decoding Fire and Ice. Fire and Ice Decoded. And this was inspired by the great, iconic superstar by the name of Pat Benatar. You heard a little bit in the beginning. Pat Benatar, Fire and Ice. What does that mean? These are, primarily tied to two elements, fire and earth. Could even say water, right? But ice is another transmutation of water. But the great band, the great band Pat Benatar, here it is off of this album called Precious Time. And I'm going to show again that Pat Benatar was just, she was a superstar. Don't take anything away from her amazing. I'm a huge fan of Pat Benatar. All her great hits, Love is a Battlefield, Hell is for Children, Hit Me With Your Best Shot. But just like everybody else on the world stage, they're being used. We're entertainment for whatever's running this reality. And I think that even whatever runs this reality comes down here and plays out characters. Wouldn't you if it was your game? Well, this is no exception. If we just look at the title of the album, Precious Time. And we decode that. And it's the number, bam, it's the 49. 49. Which is a match to this, down in a hole. That's what the celestial bodies do. They come down in the hole to play out the game. That's exactly how this works. And going further, you could see that precious, what kind of time is it? It's precious time, which is a 35, which is linked to, where do you come down into? Another dimension. And then you play out time. And time is a 14, and you play it in the box. And then you perhaps become this, which can be this. It's really interesting, right? Just off of her album title. And let me look at the length of the album. 35 minutes, 30 seconds. You add that up, you get 65. 65 is tied to zinc on the periodic table. And zinc is tied to the demiurge in the number 30 because it's the 30th element. So just like that, we have, a lot of these. And then the release date of this album, July 6th. July 6th is otherwise written as 76. And when we go to the periodic table, what is the 76? It's the Wizard of Osmium. See, this is the comical joke I think that the architect or architects created. They wanted to have fun with this reality. So they're going to be stand-up comedians. And that's what I think a lot of and you only have so much time. That's why it's precious time. And her lead single was The Fire and Ice, which was, one of her biggest hits ever. And of course, what song number was it? 2. Of course, Fire and Ice. Fire and Ice is 2. It's representing duality. It's fire or spirit coming down to be a human being and playing out ice. And you can go deeper, 319, the total time. I mean, there's so many links to this. And you can pull up the card and all that kind of stuff. But ladies and gentlemen, that was the intro. That was the intro. I have another jam-packed, gem-filled presentation. So as I always say, or often say, put on a pair of headphones, get settled in, get strapped down, block out the outside world just for however long this presentation is going to be. Get out your notepads, take some notes. You're going to see some things I didn't see. That's why I ask at the end, what do you see? But again, this code is just absolutely magnificent. And it's playing out through the fire and ice, and what does it mean? And there's, books written on that, and that's led into some movies and all that kind of stuff. But let's get, that was the intro. Let's get into the actual, the first title, Chrysalis. And I forgot to add in the title for that, but here it is, Chrysalis. And what does the chrysalis mean? I've been, ever since I was a child that I can remember, I was a fan of this word. I didn't know what it meant back then. I honestly didn't. And there's the butterfly, and the butterfly in the medicine deck. If you're a fan of the medicine, it's card number 9. 9 means endings and completions, transmutation, transformation. And chrysalis is this. It's the caterpillar in the cocoon. And what's the next stage of the evolution? It turns into a butterfly. So it's a transformation, transmutation. It's an exchange of energy, which is what music is. And then you go off of Chrysalis Records. Came out in 1968, long time ago. And the founders, Chris Wright and Terry Ellis, I'm going to break them. What do they got to do with this? Do they have free range? They're still doing stuff to this day. But I'm going to bring it into this whole thing, and we're going to start off with this Chrysalis Records, because here are the two gentlemen. What do they have to do with Pat Benatar and Fire and Ice? Well, right off the get-go, when we do the numerology of their birth names, Christopher Norman Wright, Terry Ellis, not only is it 33 letters, which, that's subtly, right? We can't go, oh, there's the 33 and get all excited. That's subtle, but the 119 is kind of the big standout, which is the mirror of the 911. And, where do we go with this 119 and what does it mean? Well, if we bring alchemy into this, and here's the connecting point, we get this, this very interesting element called tin. Now, if you watched my last decode on blockchain, this was tied to the Genesis block of Bitcoin, the founding cryptocurrency coin, Bitcoin. It was mined for 50 coins by Satoshi Nakamoto. 50. Why 50? Why 50? Well, it was tied to this element tin, and then the Tin Man, and tin equals 10, and man equals 10. It's really interesting, right? But this is very loose because we got to go somewhere with this. But 50 is the merger of worlds. I mean, if you go to the periodic table and you look at the element tin right here, you're going to see that this right here is the symbol for the merging of energy from the as above to the so below. That's what I feel this means right here. And this is an old element, very, very old element right here. Okay. And we just go a little bit further to get an extension on that, and we get their birthdays involved. Now, Christopher Wright, September 7th, Terry Ellis, August 14th. Now, obviously, lutetium is 33, which is this 71st element, and there are 33 letters in their birth names. But here's the connecting point, ladies and gentlemen. You see, Christopher Wright born on the 7th and Terry Ellis born on the 14th. I mean, it's the 417, the 714, but it's right there in the weight of lutetium. And lutetium equals 33, and they have 33 letters in their words and in their birth names. And lutetium is wrapped around Lucy and Lucifer. And Lucifer being the light bringer. See, if we just erase or delete the programming of Lucifer being the devil just for 1 second, and get a little bit of a deeper meaning of what this possibly could go into, we might just have a little bit more keys to the kingdom here. But going a little bit further, how about the timestamp of these guys' birth? This is where it gets super interesting. September 7th to August 14th. Now, obviously, Terry was born before, but here are the days on the calendar, not including their years. You could do that as well, but it's 25 days in between their births. And bam, just like that, we get the fire and ice. And it's the 25. And, you know, fire is tied to the word game. I'm sorry, light. Excuse me. Fire's tied to the word light. Wow, what did I go with game? That's 13. Fire's tied to the word light. And then you get the ice. And this number 135 is a permutation of the 153, which is the fish talked about in the New Testament. It's on the IHS above the cross, the 153. You know, and so we're the ice, and it's the 25. So how about that? These two guys who were the record holders of Pat Benatar's album, and they're born 25 days apart. I know maybe, you know, like, well, okay, that's not a big deal. Okay, no problem. Let's keep going. So if we do the alchemy of fire and ice, these two words, okay, we get sulfur and we get fluorine. And when we alchemize them together and we just trust the calculator here, we get the number 50.97. Now, let me digress, because some of you are going to be like, oh, wait a minute, that's not the weight of sulfur. The weight of sulfur, the average is 32.06. But you see, these elements have the most abundant weights. Those are the ones that I'm really interested in, like the dominant energies. And sulfur's 31.972 and fluorine will be 18.998. But notice the number that we get here for the total, 50.97. And what's interesting is 97 is the 25th prime number. You see? And what do you get when you take 50 and you add it to the number 97? Pretty simple math. 147, which is going to tie to the Pi Day, which is March 14th, day 73 and 74. That's what we're living out, Pi, in this reality. Okay, but we just keep going, and, you know, again, the 50. The 50 with their names and numerology is a match to fire and ice's alchemology. 50. And we're going to get an extension upon that as well. So let's keep going. Here's the extension, ladies and gentlemen. You see, in science, these are called isotopes. So when you get a number that has the 9 or a number that you can round up as, the 31 becomes the 32. And the same goes for, excuse me, fluorine's 18.998. You're going to round up to 19. So now we have 32 and 19. And just like that, we now have an extension beyond the 50. It's 50 and 51, which is going to give you 101, which is the portal to come down here to play the game. But the 51's really interesting because, as we know, if you've been paying attention, right there in the center, it's tied to this element called antimony. And, you know, going to antimony and looking at antimony on the periodic table, it's the all-seeing eye of Horus, is what the icon the Royal Society of Chemistry uses. And here's the origin of the name. It means not alone. If you cut your brain in half, you're going to find that you have the patterns of this all-seeing eye. From Egypt, now you go way back to pre-zero, pre-Christ days, you know? Thousands and 4,000 years ago, you're going to have to go back, and you're going to get this symbol. Some of the oldest ancient texts will be tied to that. So fire and ice, what does it mean? It means spirit coming down and becoming matter, and now you have a brain, and now you're playing out the game of life. That's what it means. All right, let's go a little bit further to support this. Let's break down Pat Benatar and her numerology, her name numerology. Now this right here, Patricia May Andrzejewski Knapp. I pronounced her last name wrong. This includes her mother's maiden name. It's Knapp. Now you can take that away and her birth certificate name is going to be this, but if you're willing to go further, and I would highly suggest you all do this, if you have a mother's maiden name, your mother's knee name, okay, you take that and you combine it with your father's name that you adopted, and you're going to get an outcome of right here. And, you know, notice like the mirror of each other, 42 and 24. 42, life, the universe, everything. 24 tied to the 24 hours on the clock. But notice the total numerology for Pat Benatar, her birth name, is a 97. And just like that, we go back to the numberempire.com. 97 is the 25th prime number, which is a match. Keep your eyes to the left right there. Bam! It's fire and ice. Now, I know some of you are like, well, you didn't add the and in there. Well, that's another way you can look at it if you want to. But these are the two nouns or the subjects, fire, ice. Okay, if we just eliminate the and, you can do it that way if you want to. Right? You can do it that way if you want to, but you can clearly see the connecting points for Pat Benatar, the title of the song, and then even, the producers or the record holders, Chrysalis Records. Okay, so going a little bit further, see, this is where I know for sure, like, I don't need anybody's confirmation or acknowledgement on whether or not Mankind is being used. This is a perfect example. Because Pat Benatar, if you read this, she became interested in theater and began voice lessons, singing her first solo at the age of 8, of course, 19 being the sun card and 8 being the prime of that, at Daniel Street Elementary School. And this is the song she sang at 8 years old. It Must Be Spring. And I'm going to do the numerology of that. And just like that, we get another 51. And I just go right back to Fire and Ice and the alchemology of that, and there's the 51. So ask yourself this question. Do you think Pat Benatar, her mind, do you think she had fully control over it in her whole life? Or is it possible that we're all living out a screenplay? Because she was 8, right? That no one's trying to dupe you. Pat Benatar wasn't sitting down at 8 years old and, decided to sing this song in her elementary school because she knew the alchemy was going to be 51, and she knew she was going to sing Fire and Ice on her second album. I mean, that's just crazy thinking. That's ludicrous thinking to actually even conjure up these ideas. And you could just keep going with, Daniel Street, Daniel and the Lion's Den's tied to Leo and the sun. I could have just kept going and going, but this is just absolute support. I'm not going to say proof, but this is my support to show that mankind, man and woman, were being used to fulfill the blueprint called life. And we're just along for the ride. And that's totally fine. Just got to know what your screenplay is. So there it is, the starting point for this first topic. And Chrysalis, Pat Benatar, the two gentlemen, and her elementary school, et cetera, et cetera. So that was kind of the singing part of it, the music part of it. Let's get into some esoteric now. This is where it's going to get super interesting. Let's get into the first topic now, or the second topic, called ice. Ice. We're going to start with ice first. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get into some real science now. Some things that, are on the world stage that we all take part of. We've all experienced. And that's, the transmutation of water into a vapor, or an ice into a water into a vapor. And then it just dissipates into thin air, and it's gone. And that's the water cycle, precipitation. Check out my 42 decoded. I covered all that. But notice that here are the numbers linked to what water does when it turns to a vapor and evaporates eventually. It's called sublimation. And then when water turns from a liquid into a solid, it's called deposition. Notice that word D. Decide, demon. Okay? It's this D. That should tell you perfectly why it's associated with ice. Because you demonize. It goes down. Okay? It goes down below the D. So this is a very interesting word used. And of course, this is used in the court of law, deposition. You ever been in a deposition before? So it gets really interesting. But the numbers are so fascinating. The vapor, 212 Fahrenheit, and that's a conversion into Celsius, 100 degrees Celsius. And then water turns to an ice at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius. And then I also have what water is at a liquid, which is 33 degrees Fahrenheit. But let's start with the ice. And, how do we become ice? What is fire? Fire would be the vapor. Sublimation. This would represent heaven in the context of these stories and ideas that we've been programmed with. And then this show comes out in 2016, I think, or something like that, off the great show off the CW. If you haven't seen this show, you should check it out. I mean, it's all about the fall of man. That's what it's about. And it's these 100 kids. They're all prisoners up on an ark in space, and they get sent down to Earth after Earth has been uninhabited because there was a nuclear event. It's really interesting. But you see, this right here represents the 100. It's spirit, starting at the sublimation point, or the point of the vapor, and now it wants to come down and play the game, and now it has to move into ice, which is the deposition. Okay, so you start at the 100, and just like that, we get into the deposition. And I mean, look at how crystal clear this is. Deposition being 45, and if you've been paying attention, what does that tie into? Bam! Just like that, we get Pandora's box. So what happens is the 100, maybe, just maybe, spirit, the sentient beings, looking down over Earth and say, you know what, that game looks pretty damn cool. I want to go play it. And now you come down here to play the game. In order to play that game, you need to take on a physical body. The physical body is far different frequency-wise than the spirit. The spirit would be the vapor, and the physical body would be the ice. And now you're in a deposition position. And now you're in the Pandora's box, the 45, tied to rhodium and the rosy cross that gives the bees honey, and the Rosicrucians, and all that great stuff that they talk about. Pandora's box. And it wouldn't be complete without this right here. To kind of summarize this whole thing with this story, these ideas, is that it's the fallen angel story. And coming down and becoming ice from fire. Light slowed down into physical matter. That's what this is telling all of us right here. In the script of the game of life, right? And we have to figure out, what is it you believe? What really happened? What is your 1 + 1 = 2? So going a little bit further, let's bring some more mathematics. Let's bring in the string of pi now to get another picture, another layer, and some alchemy. So what I decided to do is, I decided to take a look at where this 32 for this deposition, representing the deposition, and 33, because you see, water is ice. It's a solid at 32. This one, I feel, it represents our bones, our skeletal bones, the teeth, the hard structures of our being. But what about our bodies? They're primarily made up of water. So we're now at 33 degrees Fahrenheit, and it would be 0.55 in Celsius. So it's 32 and 33. These are the markers to be a human being down here as ice. So we go into the string of pi, past the 3 point, and we measure the 33rd digit to end this, which is the number 2. And of course, 2 means duality. Fire and Ice was the second song off of Pat Benatar's album. And look at what the total outcome is for this string right here. 157, which is, here's where the comedy comes in. It's a direct match to the average atomic weight or isotope of gadolinium, the 64th element on the periodic table. And what is the number 64? Well, it's tied to the human design. If you're a fan of that, the gene keys, 64 numbers in the I Ching, 64 numbers on a chessboard, representing duality, 64 possible codons in our DNA. And the reason why this element's so special with its expressions is it was used to make television screens. Think about what I'm showing you here. Gadolinium was used to make television screen. You're on television. When you come down to become a part of this reality, you're now being observed on TV. That's what this is saying to me. And I mean, even gadolinium, when you do the numerology, equals the number 35, which is a match to that Precious Time, the album that Pat Benatar came out with. Precious is 35. So the television, the movie that you're in, it's a precious movie. And you're being watched and observed as you come down and become a physical matter called a human being. Okay, so let's keep going with this. And we now have the tarot. The reason why I'm showing the tarot is because this is the 0 card, and water turns to ice, representing our bones and skeletal structure at 32 degrees. And when you convert it, it's 0 degrees. And this represents the deposition, the ice. And we become the fool down here as a fallen angel in Pandora's box. We enter the shit show. And when you're first born, this is what you look like. Kind of, right? You're a fool. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what it feels like about anything. And as you progress and you get programmed through society, well, then you start to really catch on quickly that, like, whoa, wait a minute. Did I sign up for this? How do I remain a fool? It gets really interesting. Going further, I decided to, of course, look at alchemy with this. And, these two numbers are very important, 32 and 33. Now, most of you have 33 vertebrae. Some of you will have 34. But, that number 33 is very, very big in the esoteric world. Many of you, there's the 33 Mason. Many people will attach it to the Masonic. See, folks, I don't believe that ascension is going to fall into these two numbers. I think it's far beyond. I think now ascension would be 100 or 212. It's going to definitely be higher than these two numbers because I feel these two numbers represent what it means to be a human being. 32 degrees is where water turns to ice. That represents our bones and our teeth. And then water is a liquid at 33, and that represents our muscles and cells and everything else that's made up of water. And there we have it, germanium and arsenic. And what's so interesting, and why I know this is absolute in my book, are the isotopes or weights of germanium and arsenic. And we can just bring in the blood types. And let me just bring them in. Here they are. I said it off topic there, but there are the blood types, folks. Just like that. The pH of the blood, which I showed in my bloodline decoded. Here it is. Here's where you want to be. This is where your blood will be, or you'll be dead. It will measure between 7.35 and 7.45, right around there. That's alkaline base. That's going to be slightly alkaline. Okay? Slightly love. And when you look at the 7.3, 7.4, you can clearly see it's right there on the weights of these two elements. And I'm using the most abundant. Germanium's average is 72. So it would still be in the range, but you'll be acid. You'll be acid, okay? But this is where you want to be in the green, 7.3, 7.4, and it's right there on the two elements. And this is perfectly synchronizing because this is the source code playing out. Now, if we add them up, if we add up the germanium and arsenic, we're going to get 65. We're going to get to that. But when we add up the atomic masses or the weights, you're going to get 148 point something, something, something. And if you've been paying attention to my decodes, I came out with one called Life is But a Dream. And I had showed it with support in that decode that it's very possible we're all living out a dream, and it's not real. Seems real, feels real, looks real, but we're just inside the dream of the cosmos. So row your boat gently down a stream. Merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream. This element represents the dream, which I showed in my Life is But a Dream decoded. So please check that one out. Samarium. Okay. So very, very interesting. And then, when we do the numerology of germanium and arsenic, just like that, we get the 51 again. So think about what I'm showing you here. Germanium and arsenic, the two elements that I feel make up what it means to be a human being, a fallen angel. 32 and 33, it's numerologically, it's the element antimony, and we go back to that all-seeing eye of Horus, chopping your brain in half, and this is what it's going to look like. Right? These are wow factors, folks. Jaw on the floor, wow factors. This is the source code. How could it be any other way for all of us playing out this experience in this game of life? Now, when we go a little bit further and we add up the protons to get a different layer and extension of what it means to be the human being experience down here, we now get into an interesting element called terbium. Terbium adding up to the 65 protons, 158. 58 is Puppet Master. It's the 158. But what's so fascinating about this, and the key element for this, is the picture that they used to describe terbium and what it was used for. And this is a compact disc. You remember CDs? Not too long ago, we were using them till MP3s came out and squashed the CDs. Some of you still have them, but they've become outdated because they're physical objects, and physical objects take up space. MP3s barely take up anything. But what is a CD all about? It represents Earth. It's round. It's got the piece in the middle, which represents the North Pole. And what are CDs? What happens with CDs? They get written on. How do they get written on? With light. A light diode lights, and it writes on the CD. You remember when you used to burn CDs? Well, it would have to use light to do that. So the light from above comes down and writes on the compact disc of life called Earth. That's what this is telling all of us. These are the clues that all of us are playing through right here. This is to me, this is a no-brainer, an absolute, and to me, it's totally funny. I mean, it's just, I'm not laughing right this second, but I was laughing when I found this, because these are absolute layers that I think are very important to take a look at. What about the cards of illumination? Bringing in a separate layer now. Beyond alchemy and numerology, we get the cards of illumination, 52 cards in a deck of cards matching the 52 weeks. 4 suits, 4 seasons. You guys know the drill. You guys and gals know the drill. You should know it by now. How important these cards are. We've played with them for so long, but they have occult and esoteric meanings to them. And this is no exception. Card 32 and card 33. Right there, they're the diamond suit, Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Okay? Lucy in the sky with diamonds. And it's the 6 of diamonds and the 7 of diamonds. 6 meaning perfection, the last day of creation, and then 7 being the observer of that creation, the day of rest and reflection. And just like that, you have a human being, and 7 is the crown chakra. But you see, when you add these up, or pull them together, I should say, 6 and 7 become 67, and just like that, we now have a connection to the most magnetic, think about that, holmium, the most magnetic element on the entire periodic table. Why is that important to look at? What do you think the human being experience is all about? Magnetism and electricity. And we're magnets, and we're being polarized down here. And the polarization is the angel and the demon that are on your shoulders, talking to you all the time, wanting your attention. And we're very magnetic, and this is the holmium. 164, remember the 64 in the beginning that I showed? Tied to the chessboard and the DNA that we have, and et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, when we take this holmium and we take a look at it a little bit deeper, holmium, the numerology of holmium, when we say it equals the number 30, which is a match to the word role play. I've come out with this. This is being redundant now because I've come out with this many times with this slide. And then, is it the demiurge that's role playing all of us? Are we just a puppet on strings? I know a lot of you are not going to tolerate that because you feel like you're in control of your life. That's fine. I'm going to leave it up to you as the observer. There's no force here. Just showing you the amusement park. But this element right here, zinc, I already talked about that. Has an average weight of 65. There's that notorious 65. We're going to go right back to terbium again, which I already showed in a few slides prior to this one. So these are absolutes in my book right here. We're being role played remotely. Just how much remote control are we being, how much are we being controlled by? I don't know, folks. But I mean, you can clearly see the source code in Pat Benatar and the Chrysalis records. And how about if we do the numerology of the 6 of diamonds and 7 of diamonds when we say that? Well, we get the 121. And if you know what you're looking for, again, just go right back to antimony and the element on the periodic table right here, 121. And the all-seeing eye. You see? So these, I mean, when you get one layer after another layer after another layer that are different, like the cards are different than the alchemical elements, but the alchemical elements, when you do them through numerology, germanium and arsenic equals 51, which is the protons of antimony. And then when you do the 32nd and 33rd card from the cards of illumination, you do their numerology, you get the 121, which is, again, it's going to be the same outcome, just now attaching to the isotope, the atomic mass of this element. So these are undeniable, folks. When you have connecting points through many different vantage points, I mean, what are we to say with this, really, and where do we go? How about the number 6 and 7? When we say 6 and 7, we get 33, and this is where water moves into its liquid state. Again, it's the human being experience. 33, of course, tied to the crucifixion story. How many vertebrae most of us have, where you get crucified in the Golgotha and the brain, and supposedly where the Kundalini rises. All these things fit into the narrative of what it's like to be a human being. But all this is coded because it was supposed to be coded, because this is whatever created this reality, it's its reality. And we're just along for the ride. And this is just absolute support here. If we take the 6 of diamonds and 7 of diamonds and move them into the tarot to get the picture, it's not only 70 and 71, and when you add that up, you get 141, which is pi itself. But look at the outcome for the numerology of these two cards. 137, which is the 33rd prime number. Go right back up to here. 67 is 33. See how like how detailed this code is, this source code? And if you know what these mean, if you know what these mean right here through the interpretations, you have more keys to the kingdom. So you should go study these cards. This represents what it means to be a human being right here. If you know what you're looking for and know how to interpret the cards. All right. The 137, 33rd prime number, it's tied to the fine structure constant. All right. And I believe it's tied to time travel, which would make sense because sublimation to deposition, what it means to be fire turning into ice, what it means to be a fallen angel coming down here as a spirit to play out the game of life, it involves time travel. Right. And I got a decode coming out on that. I'm still working on it. But that was the ice part. How about the fire? Let's get into fire. How do we get to sublimation? How do we get the heck out of here? A lot of people, they want to leave this place, but you don't even know what's beyond this place. What if it's worse than it is here? So you're so antsy, but have you made peace with this reality? And you can make peace with it and become more in tune with it and stop complaining and pointing the finger and be grateful for your life. Be grateful for it. That's one of the requisites, I feel. But anyway, let's get into the angel part, the angelic part, where the spirit decided to come down and become matter, but up in heaven, this would be heaven, right? Sublimation. It's when water turns to a vapor. It just goes right to a vapor. After you put the water on boil, a lot of you put the water on boil, you boil to make pasta or whatever. This is the numbers associated with it in the numerology. 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius is the conversion. Sublimation is the word to describe water turning into a vapor, which is used to describe ascension, going back to source. 37. And as you've been following on, 19, 37, 46. That's that loop, that constant loop. How about this word that ties up with the 37 as well? So this is absolute, like what's watching over us? The eye in the sky. What does it mean to be a spirit? Going back to the sky, the eye in the sky, where you sublimate, right? These are absolutes with the 37. We know how big the 37 is. And then when we get the picture for the alchemical aspect, it doesn't get any more clear than this, folks. It's rubidium, the 37th element. And there's that eye staring you in the face. You can't miss it. You go to the Royal Society of Chemistry, their description is going to tell you this is used to make photocells, right? But we know there's more layers than just one definition. Just like songs, when people sing songs, there's more definitions to what the singer's singing about. I've shown this over and over, personally, and I know a lot of you have as well. But how about that right there, rubidium, the eye in the sky, and the number 85, it's tied to Sirius. The original Greek spelling through the numerology of the Greek word, 85. It's tied to astatine, which is the most rarest element on Earth, the 85. All tied to the eye in the sky, which is tied to sublimation, which is where water turns to a vapor from a solid or liquid. Really interesting, folks, with these numbers. So here's kind of the outcome through alchemy now. All right, is we have the two elements below representing what it means to be a human being. Germanium, arsenic, and I would even say this is the spot you don't want to be. Germanium, you want to at least be here, right? You would at least want to be here. I mean, this is going to be isotope 75, which is tied to Lucifer, and 75 is going to be tied to the speed of light. And when you use that in this context, the light would be the representation of the vapor. Okay, we just got to convert it into whatever we're looking at. But I feel like it's, this element radon is the element that represents sublimation. When a water goes from a liquid to a vapor and it just evaporates into thin air and it starts all over. It's the water cycle, which is, I feel, the reincarnation cycle. But there's the 212.993, this radon right here, 86th element. So, we start to look at this 86th element and we get into Eden. So, Eden is 19. Now, where does the 19 come from? Well, it goes to radon. See, radon is 19. And so is Eden. And that whole story of Eden, if you haven't seen my Eden's Recycled Garden, please check it out. A lot of you have watched it. Thanks for the support. Eden represents heaven. It represents the sun, which just may be what heaven is. So when you want to go to heaven, you're going to want to go to the sun. It's pretty pure there. It's pretty hot though, right? And then radon's that 19. And the picture is in the tarot, right? And what, if you check out the water cycle, I mean, what evaporates water naturally? The sun. The sun. And then it goes into the clouds move through earth, and then it rains again, and then the moon has its say, and that's the water cycle. And I feel like that's the reincarnation process. But anyway, keep going a little bit further. What about this separate layer through a different text, through a different construct, from a different perspective? Is the Bhagavad Gita. And now you get into the mighty Krishna. Lord Krishna. If you read the Gita, if you're somebody who's just completely sold on the Holy Bible and that's it, like that's the only book I follow. Have you ever read this Gita book? If you haven't, why haven't you read it? And if you go to somebody who's a practitioner, someone who's a believer, someone who's a supporter, they're going to say, well, who's the spirit number one? Who's the absolute truth? Lord Krishna. And that's it for them. That's what they believe. And then you would say, well, wait a minute. I think it's Jesus Christ, or I think it's Yahweh. Or, well, who's right now when you go into a room and you're starting to discuss these ideas? Well, if you're somebody who's in the Hinduism tradition or the Buddhic tradition, you're going to be, well, it's Krishna. And then you get into, Vishnu and Brahma and Shiva. But if you're coming from a Christianity perspective or a Judaism perspective, it's not going to be that. Well, then who's right? Because you're seeing the outcomes here. They're all matching now. You have a completely separate archetype in the Bhagavad Gita and then the Holy Bible. It's going to be the same thing. 19. So is Jesus just Krishna? A lot of people think Jesus is the son. Well, now we have Krishna tied to it. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is all a big Ponzi scheme. It's not a bad thing. Religion is. And these ideas. But, if it doesn't get you one way, it's going to get you the other way. With this whole aspect right here. And this is all tied to sublimation. And this Lord Krishna is beautiful. The whole story about it, and read about it. Like pure and holy. This is the description of the Christ. But anyway, we get a little bit further with Radon and the rising of the morning. Radon being 19. 19 is tied to the sun card, tied to the golden ratio, and tied to this scripture describing Lucifer, the only one. Now, Isaiah 14 verses 12. See, he's known as the son of the morning. What's another word for the morning? How about dawn? And now you get Ray Dawn. Ra Dawn. Ra, the sun god. You see the connecting points? And the 86 being tied to that sublimation. And here's the final slide for this topic. And this kind of says it all. Really. We skip the 32 because 33 is in the forefront of the 32. To be the ultimate human being at 33, this is where, you'll be mostly water, getting out of the physicality, on your way to ascension, perhaps. Whatever that means, whatever that looks like, even if that's possible. I mean, Jesus equals 74. Lucifer equals 74. This is very poisonous. But if you take radon, which represents sublimation and going back to the angelic realms, perhaps just going back to the sun, and you subtract the two together, the atomic masses, look at the outcome that you get. And now you get into, the Phoenix event and archaics, and if you follow Jason Bashir's and his stuff, his great information, now you get into the Phoenix Rising event, which, again, folks, I mean, are we just going to build a phoenix? And the phoenix is all down here. This represents Earth. And when it's time for the phoenix to rise, we're all part of that as a collective. I mean, there's the 138 right there. 71 on the back end on the feminine side, 71 representing lutetium. And, when you add these two up, you get 209, and that's going to be tied to polonium, which is also tied to the moon. I mean, that's part of the Ark of the Covenant. So these are pretty crystal clear, I feel, anyway. And then if you take the 86 and subtract the 33, you're going to get the number 53. And Yeshua equals 53. 53 is the 16th prime number. Okay, so these are just layers that to me are absolutely undeniable with fire and ice. So that was my last one. That was my last one, yeah. So that was my last slide, ladies and gentlemen. So what is it you saw during this presentation? What is it you saw during this presentation? I'd love to hear your comments. Just keep them cordial. Any toxicity will be removed. Not that I'm trying to limit anybody with their comments, but just, if you have different beliefs, totally fine, but just keep them cordial. But support your opinion. Why do you think that's your way and it should be this way and all that kind of stuff, because I'd love to hear what you saw and things I miss, things that you see. A lot of you great decoders, you see things I don't see, but I thought this slide right here was pretty absolute, ladies and gentlemen, on what it means to be a human being down here in duality and then going up to the radon and back to the sun and whatever that looks like. Because, I have a big decode coming out on the scripture that talks about the rapture. And that's going to be 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 17. There's the 417 tied to Lucifer again. So it just keeps going back to Jesus and Lucifer together. And are they just one and the same? And are we just creating this Phoenix event? And this is the formula for ascension and going down to deposition, being a human being, a fallen angel, and then going back up again. And the exchange of energy, which is what water is when it turns from a solid to a liquid to a vapor. It's transmutation. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, that's all I got for today. My name is Logan for Decode Your Reality. Until next time, we will see you later.